of the spiritual path. I say the way of the spiritual path because everything has its own way. There is a way to babies, there's a way to women, there's a way to men, there's a way to sexuality, there's a way to gender identification. That's a big topic these days. There's a way to school. When we go to school, we have to be in that way. So on the spiritual path, there's no one way, but there is the way. Today we're talking about spirituality and sexuality. The purpose of this show and all my shows are to share. I seem to have gathered quite a bit of knowledge because of my experiences and my awarenesses, the way I'm wired, spiritually speaking, because I have access to different dimensions, etc. So the purpose of this show is to share what I have with you. So if you're dealing with some issues, then you can come to me and we can do a session and you can do your work with me. That's what I would like, and that's why I'm doing these shows. Let's talk about sexuality and spirituality. First, let's break down sexuality. When I was like a teenager, I was like, that's weird. Like, it's kind of weird. If you think about sex, it's weird. So an alien came and they were like, oh, we grow on trees. Like, how do you guys create? And we said, well, this is what happens. You touch these certain body parts and there's kissing and there's this and this and that. And then that happens. They'd be like, okay. So when you think about it on paper, so to speak, it's a weird thing. When you're in the middle of a sexual experience, then you're not even thinking, hopefully. There's no thoughts of like, oh, this is weird. You're more in the feeling state. So we move from a mental state to an emotional state, an experiential state. In healing for me and in life and kind of being somebody who enjoys my life, it's the experiencing of life that gives our spiritual presence here the connection to the evolution. I believe that we are spiritual people having a physical experience, having a human experience. The most way that happens is when we experience things. So if, say, where I'm a ghost or I'm a spiritual energy field, and I get to embody this physical presence, this time and space on this planet. The richest part of that is experiential. And the richest part of experiential is sexuality. So we have two polar opposites. Our human self, our animal self. People forget that we're animals. I talk about this with my kids at Sunday school all the time. I'm like, okay, what are you? And we go through identification. And I'm like, and what else are we? We're animal. And they are like, I'm an animal? Yeah, we forget because we have so much invention, so many sophisticated things of distraction that we forget our animal nature. So our animal nature is very sexual because, of course, part of the human reason of existence is to procreate. When we're having sex, we're living the human experience. This is our job, so to speak, or one of our jobs of why we're here on this planet. To exist and to continue to be. So in the spiritual realm, when we're here and we're having sex, it is an integration of the spiritual energy and the human energy. If the spiritual energy can be very present in the sexual experience, it's bringing our animal energy to its peak. So it's really this amazing connection between the spiritual and the human experience within us individually. And then when we're in a coupleship, man, woman, like whatever the mixture is, then that's like the essence, the peak, the pinnacle of all existence to me. They call that experience tantric. When we bring spirituality into sexuality, our energy field that is our body It's like there's a blueprint of energy here, and then on top of that is the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body. When we're in that right and perfect match, our body becomes the energetic body that it is. Waves of experience can happen. Like, for instance, with one of my best matches partners, like my thigh would be like, touch me, touch me, touch me, touch me, but all this other stuff would be going on, and then there's one little layer of this thigh being wanting to be touched, and it's not like a sexy part of the body, it's just one little spot. And then this part would be having an attack, like, oh, I can't stand it anymore. And there's no like, oh, excuse me, can you please touch it? You can't even like take the hand and put it there because there's so much rich depth, so many layers of awareness, basically, and connectivity. And then at the right and perfect moment, his hand would go and touch that part, and that part would be like, oh, okay. So they'd have like a mini orgasm on that part of the leg. That's tantric sex. And that's connectivity. When we are so connected to another in that manner, it's as if God, whatever you want to call that, divine love, divine power, divine intelligence, the universal consciousness, comes in and makes love to the two beings who are making love. Bodies move in ways that we're not in charge of anymore, and it's just this beautiful, magical, so deeply connected experience where two bodies mesh, where two energy fields mesh, where stuff gets healed because it's such a rich and beautiful experience. Any negativity, grudges, resentments, fears, insecurities, they just get blown out. When artists are in their creative process and they're creating their sculpture or their art or their music, it's that same connectivity, but not with another. In dance, yes, but with their medium, with their paint, with their tones, with their music, with whatever it is. It's that ultimate connectivity. And of course, that's where babies are created. Of course, that would be it. Now, babies are created under terrible situations as well, but the design, the ultimate design, would be to have that extreme connectivity and then the miracle of a pregnancy happening. So just like the sperm and the egg combine, it's that dynamic of the two beings combining and into such a beautiful experience. So that's on the high end. And then how does sexuality and spirituality match? How does that human base foundation and the highest vibration of spirituality, how do those two connect? Because in religions, they don't want them to connect, because I think it's a matter of that's the human experience, but we're trying to tell you something else, so we want you to pay attention to what we're saying, so please disregard your humanness. In the Catholic Church, when I started learning that they don't promote birth control, I was like, why? I said, more membership. They just want more members in their church. That's why have babies. More members for the Catholic Church. And perhaps they thought it was interfering and that each child is a gift from God. So don't stop that process. But I really think it's more members. The priests and the nuns. So with the nuns, it has been documented that they have a high percentage of hysterectomies because they're not using their sexual energy. They're not using their sexual power. And unfortunately, we have come to know, those of us personally have experienced that. And then through stories in the news and finally the truth being told, the priests have a lot of power. They're in charge of many people. They're holding space for a community. So they're not knowing what to do with their sexual energy. So they go ahead and have sex with the children because it's an easy target. And they have sex with the wives of the men who are paying for them to be in leadership, which is super crazy. because the integrity value, like everything gets blown out. We don't talk about sex very much in our culture, unfortunately. There is a lot of darkness around sexuality, and it really breaks my heart. It makes me terribly sad when it is used. It's such a powerful tool, is used inappropriately. There's a lot of power over in sexuality. I have a dear friend who is a pretty high-level spiritual path, in no particular tradition. He is following a teacher, and he came through town the other day, and we were talking, and he said, sexuality, sex, is really the biggest thing that gets in our way of our spiritual development. I'm like, why would it be sex? And then, of course, this polar opposite of the human base of our desire and aggression that is sex, versus the peace and harmony that is spirituality. So when we look at sexuality and sex as a motivator, then we can start seeing industries. The whole beauty industry is to look sexy. The entire clothing industry is geared towards sex, looking sexy, looking hot, looking powerful, to attract attention, basically from people who you want to have sex with. And that's what it is. So billions of dollars probably with that industry. The whole magazine deal with the airbrushing and our young women trying to emulate fake expectations. I was speaking with a young lady, and she was a classic beauty, like a timeless beauty, gorgeous, simple, pure, and she's like, oh, I'm invisible to the boys. And I'm like, that's how we're feeding our kids, because they don't understand that that's not important. It's really not. It's a part of life, but it's not the thing to live for. And how many people have gone into depression because of sexuality, because of their identity of who they are as a sexual being, not fitting in with mass consciousness, but that's their true self. So feeling rejected and so on and so forth, because there's no dialogue, like at the dinner table. Hi, honey, did you have any sex today? It's not a conversation. Within the family, my experience was my mom and dad were freaks about it. They were like, no, boys, don't talk to them. They're bad. They're evil. You can't trust them. Don't look at them. They're not allowed at the house. And I'm like, really? I didn't understand what they were freaking out about. And I would check in with my other girlfriends, and they're like, yeah, my parents aren't like that. Like, they tell some stuff, but they're not like yours. So I thought, why are they so crazy? So sexuality and spirituality are quite the story there. When we have affairs, we wonder, what is that in the consciousness of the person? Needs in the marriage and the relationship are not being met. And that's why. So a healthy, happy relationship doesn't have affairs. There's something missing in the relationship. So it's so easy when an affair happens, the partner says, you ruined our relationship, you've spoiled everything, how could you? You've broken promises. And I say, yes, and what led that person to leave the relationship in a sexual manner to begin with? Another thing about sexuality is very often in marriages or long-term relationships, sex stops happening. And for me, I wonder why wouldn't couples want to keep that included, that rich piece? And I know not every coupleship is tantric, unfortunately. But when it's just an act, or we're pleasing one another, or it's just to release energy, then we're missing the connection. It's been studied that men have sex for connection. And when I say men, I have to say our masculine side, because of all these new genders that we're experiencing. We all have feminine side and we all have masculine side. So depending on just our hormones, our culture, our family upbringing, the sexual experiences we've had in our own past, we can lean towards masculine or feminine. So when there's a masculinity, there is element, and I'm speaking to men now who are in their older years, and they're like, I am so glad that that edge of always being hungry for sexuality is off, because it's a constant thing. I had a friend who was very straight, very put together, very respectful, never inappropriate, never like a dog. And we were talking about sex, and he said, and I said, is it really on their mind all the time? And he said, 24/7. And this was from a guy that did not indicate. And I was like, oh man, that's got to be rough. I believe that the male species also hold anger for the human species. And that's probably because if women were angry, we would kill our children. Some children behave in such a manner, I wonder how they're still living because of their behavior. But the generosity of a mother, she has compassion and understanding. And men are anger, I think they hold anger because of protection. So if we weren't angry people, then anybody could come and steal the children and steal the women, and then, we would have trouble in a social setting. So I think anger is for protection. But I think anger and sexuality are very similar energies, and there's a passion and a power about those two that makes them more sexually aggressive and active, and like always on the hunt, and can't stop looking at other women even though you have a beautiful wife in front of you or a girlfriend, and then their eyes are still scanning the room. It's like they can't help it. It's their animal nature. And I think sexuality and anger for men are kind of hand in hand. So depending on their experiences, that stuff might get a little mixed. And unfortunately, when men are raping women and being violent towards them, I think it's mixed in with anger and with experiences that have happened, unfortunately. So I've just laid out a bunch of ideas right now. There's no conclusion, but I wanted to start people thinking about spirituality and sexuality. I really want your feedback on your personal experiences of how those two connect or disconnect for you. I'm here for you. Subconscious is where a lot of the answers are to these questions that I've popped up. And I would love to work with you on this topic. So thank you for joining me on the Lighter Side Network, my show, The Way of the Spiritual Path. Why am I talking about this topic on this show? Because in the subconscious work that I do with my clients, it is a frequent topic. People come to me confused, upset, unclear of who they are and why they're here, unclear of their purpose, unclear of the way they express themselves, unclear of why they're stuck, unclear of why their relationships are turning out the way they do. And very often, we can boil it back down to a time and a place where there was inappropriate sexual behavior, known as molestation, even rape, and that has set their course off. To me, when that happens, even if it happens once in somebody's life, even if it was only for 3 minutes, if a child is on this course, moving forward in this direction, and that happens, it just goes off a little bit of course here. And at the time, no big deal. But 30, 40 years later, they're way over here instead of way over here. And they know, in their heart of hearts, they know I'm not supposed to be here. This isn't my plight. This isn't my, like this setup that I'm living in, this mentality, this emotional state is not who I am and who I'm supposed to be. I don't know how I got over here because I know there's better things for me. And that would be on this course. They know that this is their course, but they're way over here. Many people are way over here and they don't remember that they've been molested. They don't remember something happened to them somewhere along the way. So let's go back into time and space when things do happen. So my parents never let us sleep over. They never let anyone. We had one babysitter. We were not allowed to be in closed doors with other children. Like, they were tight about everything. They were kind of freaky about everything because they knew what happens and they wanted to protect us. They did not educate. When I say us, my sister and myself, they didn't say, this is what happens, this is why it happens, this is what I want you to say, this is what you need to do, this is what you look for. They didn't give us that. They just said, boys are bad, boys are evil, don't trust them, don't be around them, don't even look at them, you are not dating until, you leave the house. I was sent to an all-girls school. So I believe that my sexuality threatened my father, and he didn't want to deal with that. He didn't know how to converse about that, and he was just like, no, it's just not, none of that is happening under my watch. So that's basically the way I rolled out when I was a kid. And you would think with all of that very intense watchfulness that I would not have been touched, but nope, sure enough, traveling priest came to school. And he was an artist, and he drew pictures on the board as he was telling us stories. And he traveled the world serving children. And this was just a thing he did. And he was from Belgium. My mom's from Germany. He did art. My mom did art. And I thought it would be really cool to have this man over to my house. And we could have a lovely time, and we could draw pictures and talk about spirituality. Because I've always been interested in spirituality, even as a child. So they were like, wow, this kid's inviting this grown person. Yeah, that's cool. And he came over for the afternoon, and we had a long time together, and I would sit in his lap, and he would rub on me. So we would be at the piano, which was a little short wall. Here's the piano, little short wall, and here's the kitchen, and my mom was preparing the food. And he'd be playing the piano kind of with one hand and on me with his other hand. And he would be getting all sweaty and hot. And as I reflect back, I'm like, how come that wasn't weird for me? How come I didn't jump off of him and say something? It's because when we're children, everything is new. And as adults, we forget how new everything is. So we're like, oh, this is just one of those awkward life experiences. Like, I don't know what's happening, and this feels icky. And, well, okay, going to the doctors and getting things in my ear, and like that feels icky too. Like, I guess this is just an icky thing. So we don't have the clarity because we've not been taught. Like, if you feel creepy, I don't care who it is. I teach this to the Sunday kids when I teach them spirituality. We go over this many times. And we don't talk about sexuality in our culture. And this is a conversation that needs to happen with children. If you feel creepy, I don't care if it's a teacher, if it's a father, if it's your aunt, if it's the neighbor, if it's somebody of authority, coach, whatever, the answer is no. You just like stand up and say, no, I don't feel good right now. I don't like how I'm feeling. You need to stop what you're doing, and I'm going to go tell somebody, because that wakes that person up. So when we're a child and we're being sexually addressed, and it doesn't have to be an insertion. It doesn't have to be a kiss. It doesn't have to be that. Any kind of creepiness. So like this guy, he was rubbing on me. And he was getting off, and everything was hot and sweaty, and I felt awkward, and I just kind of shut down. I was speaking to a child who another child grabbed them. And we went into the subconscious of that child, and I said, how did it feel? Because she had it all justified in her head, because that's what we do as human beings, is we adapt. All of the work that I've done with my clients, my amazement continually is in awe of how adaptable we are to crisis, to drama, to trauma, to being beaten down, to being disregarded, neglected, and abused. We just adapt. We keep moving forward. We arrange it. Our mind will say, listen, there's no context. There's no reference for this. There's no reason we need to keep this around. So we're just going to put this in a box and we're going to shove it in the attic and we're going to forget the whole thing happened. Okay? And the rest of us says, okay. Now I'm talking about parts language, because inside of us there's many ideas, and they may be in conflict, they may be balancing one another, but they're called parts. So the part of us that can't deal with the situation, has no references, doesn't know where to store it, another part comes in and says, I have the solution, let's just brainwash this all away and pretend like it doesn't happen. So sure enough, we can manage that. It's almost like a self-hypnosis. But in the meantime, the part of us that did get molested, that experience that did happen, is rattling around in the box saying, I'm in here, I'm in here, I'm in here. And when we go into the work, into the subconscious, we can see as like a dot-to-dot picture that's coming clear. We go through our life sexually in relationship. If a molestation happened, it's almost like looking at those dot-to-dot pictures, but there's no numbers and there's no start. So we get confused, like, how come I can't get it together with this relationship thing? How come I can't express myself whenever I'm unhappy about things? How come I just lay there and let things happen to me? How come I don't like sex? How come I choose this way of gender preferences? How come I always pick this kind of partner? How come? And we never get the answers. But when people come to me and they go underneath the subconscious, into the subconscious, and we discover a memory that has been blurred, or one that's been tucked away, or one that's been completely forgotten, then when they finish the session, it's almost like they look to that dot to dot and they start seeing numbers. And they go, oh my God, no wonder. No wonder I'm like this. No wonder that happened. No wonder I react like that. No wonder I shut down. No wonder this. No wonder that. And the picture starts coming through. It feels very intense because there's a lot of disappointment, regret, sadness, sorrow. So there's a reaction to the discovery. And that takes a while, and it's a very calming thing, but there's also a relief. Oh, I'm not crazy. Oh, okay. And then an acceptance and compassion. And then from there, the healing can continue to happen if they're in relationship, if they're in a marriage that has not had sex in years. Now they know why, and now they can begin a beautiful, rich experience. So the other question that I have around this molestation is, who in their right mind would do this? So when I do prayer meditation and I ask this question, what I begin to understand is that we have a human nature. We are animal. Animal and sexuality are very connected. That's pretty much the deal there. If you think way back in time and space before the caveman's, in the caveman time when they were like, that's my niece, I can't touch her. She's only 12. Like there's no thinking in that regard. That is, I'm hungry. I want something. I need some satisfaction around here. Where's my easiest target? Just like the lion would in the group of gazelles, he would spot the little one with the broken leg. Snack. Easy. So no, if there was a committee of judgment, no one would say, oh, lion, that was the wrong thing to do. You're taking advantage of the situation. That's our animal nature. To go for the easy target, go for the easy prey. In the level of children, in which children get hit for this molestation, rape, and so on, it's the quiet ones. It's not the ones running around yelling and screaming. They're too rambunctious. So they go for the quiet one. And who's the quiet one? The neglected one, the middle child, the shy one, the one who has very low self-esteem. Because what happens is that person is excited for the attention and excited for touch. We as human beings like to be touched. We like to feel important. We like to feel special. So if some creepy person knows how to play the game and says, okay, this is what my prey likes. Even when we're hunting, we put a salt lick for the deer. Yeah, I think it's cheating, but whatever. So we're like, oh, deers like salt. So let me just put a pile of salt here and I'll go stand by this tree. And when they come to this, I'll kill them. Same. So when your mom and dad say don't take candy from a stranger, because those strange people know that children like sugar, here, let me give you some sugar, and now I have you in my grasp, and here we go. So the mentality of the person who molests children, more often than not, it has been discovered that they too have been molested. So I count it as a zombie thing. So as soon as we're touched, right, the negative person touches the innocent person, now this person has a transformation. They receive the shame, the guilt, the darkness, and the biggest thing of all, the secret of the ugly thing. The activity happens, and then that person goes away. If you look at animals having sex, there's like a numbness on the receiver. Like they just go, and then it happens. So that animal turns kind of frozen, and the design of nature, because if it was fighting, then you wouldn't have sex, and then there would be no more animals of that species. So there's a calmness that happens. When we're terrified or scared, we freeze. So the child will kind of freeze. Very often, the child learns very quickly how to pop out of their body because the feeling is too intense, it's too emotional, it's too foreign, it doesn't feel good, it feels scary, it feels creepy, so they just pop out, or they blank out, or they numb out. And they know that there has been a line crossed of disrespect, basically. So if that person is crossing the line of respect and touching, then the mind already knows, red alert, red alert, red alert. This can be dangerous. If I scream, if I shout, they've already crossed the line. Who's to say they're not going to hurt me? Who's to say they're not going to steal me? Who's to say? So we get so afraid that we go into protection mode, we go into shutdown mode, and we condense. So back to that little girl recently, and I said, how do you feel when that happened, when that boy grabbed you? And she said, I feel like I went into a house and the house started shrinking. So that doesn't happen just for the event. The person leaves, and that shrinking inside the house stays with us for the rest of our lives until we readdress it. So if you're wondering why am I like this? That could be why. And when we grow older and say we remember this incident, but we blow it off. Like, oh, well, whatever, so what? Da-da-da, doesn't matter. But that part of us that got affected at that time in space, because it's a trauma, because we don't have references, because it was so many emotions packed in all at the same time, that piece of us in that time and space continues to exist. Then we have another part of us that stands in front of it and justifies it and, blows it off. Another part comes in and it says, yeah, I got this going on and I'm important because of that part of my body, and they'll wear more makeup than most people will. So those are like an easy thing because it's a mask. So they put their value on that part of their body rather than them as a person. So they'll dress like, hey, I got that part of my body going on, and that's where I'm valuable. And they'll behave from that point of view. They'll sell themselves in that manner. But really, to me, we're here to love and be loved. We're here as innocent people. We're here to be compassionate and generous with one another. When somebody is molested, it's a thievery of their innocence. It's a like a pre-sell on sexuality. The mind of children are in a developmental process and should not be exposed to sexuality because it doesn't compute into their reality. When it is when it's delivered in a manipulative way, and then all of a sudden, so there's a nice experience, attention is being paid, there's touch, there's a nice sweetness, and then somewhere in the middle of it, it gets creepy. That's so confusing and so mind-blowing to the child that they don't know what to do with that. They can't figure it. So any kind of touch has creepy undertone. But we crave the touch, but then we don't want the creepy. So it's a continual physical confusion. It's an emotional confusion. So those children will tend to overdress. They'll have lots of layers. Women who are getting molested and raped tend to put on lots of weight as a protection. Or you go the other way and you're saying, well, that's my value, here I am. And they live from their sexuality. People who are sex addicts, they're like, this is my way. I've always been like this. No wonder I attracted that kind of attention when I was young. No wonder I was having sex at 12. No, they've been pre-programmed. Things have been skewed, and they've just owned that as their reality, and they've lived from that ugliness. So when we ask, how can somebody do that to a child or an innocent woman or a defenseless person, it's because they go into zombie mode. Because that's like another aspect of themselves. When we're angry, anger takes over, and we can't help it. We're just angry. So same way, the molestation takes over, and that person, that creepiness takes over. So 1 minute, they're being their normal person, and then they see something that inspires them, and all of a sudden they're in creepy mode. So they just go into creepy zombie mode, touch the kid, have their pleasure, get the relief. It's almost like there's this darkness inside of me. I need to get rid of it. And it's a relief for them. And then I don't know how much time passes and they're like, oh my God, I did it again. Oh my God, what am I doing? Oh hell. So it's almost like a disease, a condition. And again, the secrecy. When we are molested, the deal is don't say anything. And they'll even tell some of the children, like, don't say anything or I'll kill you. And of course we're going to believe that. So when the secret is harbored, it sits within us for years and years and years. And we avoid situations. We don't develop appropriately. We carry something that's confusing, that is unattainable. We dismiss it. We justify it. We carry an attitude of defensiveness. It's a hard thing to carry. It happens in families. My request to you is, if you have children in your life, if you're an auntie or whatever, to have this difficult discussion on if anyone ever feels creepy, this is what you do. You say no, you get up, you protect yourself, no matter who it is, because we're taught to respect our elders, even though that could happen. If you yourself have been molested, not the playful, fun, normal stuff, but molested, and no matter how you've justified it or put it in your framework, please do some work around that, because it will change today's version of who you are and how you feel about yourself, myself or somebody else who does this work. Thank you for sticking in and hanging out with me on this difficult topic to talk about. I hope I've made it reasonable and understandable. Damage is done, for sure. Innocence is robbed. And for us to do the work and reclaim that part of our body instead of public property, and reclaim our connectivity and enjoying sexuality in a beautiful way instead of an awkward way. Thank you for joining me on the Lighter Side Network, my show, The Way of the Spiritual Path.